Yo, what's up guys, Ghost here, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my findings on vehicle damage. It's seen some huge changes in Season 3, and once they did give us the new values for vehicle damage for all the munitions, for all of the engineered gadgets, they didn't give us the old values, so it was kind of hard to judge on which weapons and gadgets were doing more damage and which ones are doing less. It's been pretty eye-opening, especially with the jets. They are now much more powerful than they were previously. So, if you guys enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to hit that sub button to stay up to date with everything Battlefield 6. I do this sort of video all the time, along with news and whatnot, so if that's your bag, then feel free to subscribe, and thank you guys, as always, for the support there. Okay, bit of a caveat here before we begin. They increased the health of tanks in Season 3 to 1200, so prior to that, tanks, IFVs, most vehicles in the game had 1000 HP, now the tanks have 1200, but the IFVs still have 1000, and what they've done is essentially increase the damage of almost every weapon and vehicle weapon across the board. So what that means is IFVs are now much, much weaker than they were before. So just bear that in mind, that when we're talking about damage numbers here, that whilst all the weapons are doing more damage, the tanks also have more health. So it matters how much percentage damage we're doing here as well. Alright, let's begin here with the engineer gadgets, beginning with the Javelin, because I think this was one of the ones that people thought it was getting a massive buff. So here we can see that pre-patch it was doing 350 damage, it doesn't matter where you hit the vehicle, and now it's doing 465 damage. So yes, it has seen a pretty considerable increase here in damage, but if you think about the tanks having 1000 HP before and 350 damage, it was still a 3-shot kill. And with 465 and 1200 HP, it is still going to be a 3-shot kill after as well. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to do more damage against IFVs, of course, it totally is, but it's still going to be a 3-shot kill against IFVs. So I don't think the Glaive or the Javelin or whatever you want to call it is quite as good as people thought it would be in Season 3, but it definitely has seen a little bit of a tweak here. Next up, we have the favorite RPG. That one used to do a minimum of 174 damage and a maximum of 594 if you hit the tank in the rear. By the way, they've pretty much simplified all the angles here. So the way you do minimum damage now is by hitting the turret. That is only 75% of normal damage. And if you want to do 200% of normal damage, you can hit the tank in the rear. Angles don't really matter so much anymore. So in Season 3, the RPG now does a minimum of 173 damage, which is actually the same minimum as it was before, but only a maximum in the rear of 460. So that's a drop from 594 damage to 460, and the main reason for this is that previously you could 2-shot tanks in the rear, you could 2-shot IFVs and most vehicles. Now that is going to be a 3-shot, and as we know and as DICE have detailed for us, that was one of the main changes they wanted to make with armor gameplay going forward. Next we've got the MBT Law. This one used to do 294 damage, and because it's like a lock-on weapon, the angle doesn't matter here, and now it only does 240. So once again, this one has seen a pretty big nerf. The MBT Law, I would say right now, just not worth using at all. I mean, I've never really thought it was worth using, but like, even if you can't aim to save your life, I really strongly suggest that you learn, because 240 damage on a 1200 HP vehicle isn't really going to cut it. Then we've got the SRAW, or it's called like the M136 something or other, the guided tow missile launcher for the engineer, right? This one used to do a minimum of 170 damage and a max of 494, and now in Season 3 it does a minimum of 206 and a maximum of 550. So damage-wise, it's pretty much the same, right? It's seen a little bit of an increase in damage there, but that's basically just to offset the fact that the tank now has 200 more HP. That being said, it's still going to do more damage against the IFV and other vehicles. So, you know, it was good before, it's also good now. Now, I kind of forgot to record the damage of mines pre-patch, but I think they were doing a bit more than this because they could 2-shot tanks. Now mines only do 390, so these will actually be a 4-shot. But they have increased the number of mines that you can put on the battlefield at a time, and also when you die, they will no longer disappear like they used to. So with the engineer gadgets done, it is time to move on to the vehicles, and we're going to start with the ones that have seen the biggest changes here, guys, and those are the jets, because they do not really fully reflect what DICE wrote in the patch notes. So let's just reference this here. So for the attack jet Mark 82 high drag bombs, it says they deal 300 to 400 damage now against tanks, 1080 against helicopters, and 1000 against jets. But obviously what we're mostly concerned with here is the damage against tanks. So in Season 2, these bombs used to do, well, a maximum of 335 damage. That's what I could get. They didn't always do that much. It depends where you hit the tank, you know, whether it's a direct hit or not. But now, in Season 3, they do a minimum of 335 and a maximum of 435. So that is actually more damage than what DICE themselves say that they can do in the patch notes. Now, all in all, it doesn't make that big of a difference, right? Because it's seen, yes, a little bit of a damage increase, but then tanks also have more HP. But it's not until we actually look at the combined damage with the AGMs or the air-to-ground missiles that it has much more of an effect. So previously, AGMs actually used to do like a wide range of damage. The minimum I got was 202, the maximum was 300, and they have been massively buffed. So they now do 450 damage every single time. Yes, they do more damage now than the bombs do. But what this means is that the combined damage of an AGM and a bomb in Season 2 was around 635 at a maximum. Now in Season 3, it is 885. And you might not think that sounds like the biggest difference in the world, but a lot of the time you're trying to thread your AGM, your bomb, and then some chip damage from the main cannon together to get a kill on a tank. Now, you could one-strafe tanks previously using this method, but it just means now, because of the extra damage from the AGM and the bomb, you're going to be able to get in that damage you need from the cannon much more often, because after all, the limiting factor here with the jet strafes is your flight time. And then when it comes to vehicles that don't even have 1200 HP, I mean 885 damage on an IFV, you're easily going to be able to get the remaining 115 damage there to make it up to 1000 and one strafe that IFV. Now, when we look at the fighter bombs, these have actually seen even more of a buff than the attack jets have, which I think was really needed. So previously, the fighter bombs could only do a maximum of 200 HP. You get 4 of these, and they have a really weird delay, so it's very, very difficult to land all 4 of these bombs on a target. But even if you were able to do that, you could only do a maximum of 800 HP, meaning you just cannot one-strafe any piece of armor in the game, or you couldn't. So now, after the buff, they actually do 240 to 320 damage is the most that I managed to get. If we look at the patch notes, DICE actually say they do 410 to 535, which sounded insane to me. I think that must be an error. I wondered if those were like the numbers for the attack jet bombs and they got them muddled around and swapped around or something. But the attack jet bombs don't even do 535 damage. So I have no idea where this number came from here. But with 320 damage, what this means now, and you guys are going to see that in the footage, you can actually one-strafe a tank with the fighter jet if you hit all 4 of them. Now, obviously, it's quite hard to do. You often don't have the air time. You know, the tank is going to be moving or whatnot, and you might get unlucky with some of the shots. Maybe they're not going to be direct hits. But this means you're going to be getting like maybe 900, 1000 HP done to that vehicle. So if they've taken any damage, if they've taken an RPG shot or a tank shot or anything else, you're probably going to be getting a lot more kills on armor with the fighter jet now than you were previously. Alright, moving on to the tanks, the MP shells or the multi-purpose shells, they used to do a minimum of 158 damage, a maximum of 505 in the rear, so just like with most of the weapons, they could two-shot tanks in the rear. Now, they do a minimum of 210 and a maximum of 560. So whilst yes, that is a damage increase and they're still going to be able to two-shot IFVs in the rear, they will no longer be able to two-shot tanks. And it's pretty much the same story with the HE shells, the high explosive shells. They used to do a minimum of 142 and a maximum of 412, and now the minimum has been pushed up to 180 and the max is 480. So the main difference here is that, of course, it's going to be a 3-shot against tanks, but this one will not be able to 2-shot IFVs because you're still going to be 40 damage short. Now, I kind of forgot to record footage with the armor-piercing rounds, unfortunately pre-patch, but you can see now that they do just what it says in the patch notes here, 282 at a minimum and 750 damage in the rear. So armor-piercing shells are probably still going to be your go-to just because it does 750 damage at a maximum. That means it's the only shell, it's the only anything in the game that can two-shot a tank in the rear still, just like it was pre-patch. Unfortunately, it only does 600 damage against helicopters, so you're not going to be able to one-shot even a scout helicopter, let alone an attack helicopter or a transport helicopter, but of course, since you can take 2 shells, you can just go and pair this up with the guided shell, and then you're pretty much good to go against everything. And moving on to the IFVs, it's pretty much the same story here with the HE shell. So we used to have a minimum of 9 damage and a maximum of 27, and now post-patch we have a minimum of 11. It does say 10 in the patch notes here, but I guess it's just like a rounding error or something, and we've got a maximum of 30. So you're going to see similar changes here for all the IFV weapons across the board, and that's why I've not bothered to do all the damage numbers for all of the cannons, just because, you know, they are pretty similar. Now, one of the things that's seen a major change, though, is the lock-on missile. So this used to have a minimum and a maximum damage depending on where you hit the vehicle. In the front, like, the minimum damage was 193, and in the most vulnerable part of the tank in the rear, it was 561. Now, it just does a flat 390 damage, regardless of angles, all the time. And this is kind of good and bad. Obviously, if you would have had the opportunity to shoot a tank from behind, it's less damage. But if you're fighting the tank from the front, it's actually going to be doing more damage than you would have been doing with these lock-on missiles beforehand. But as always, I would definitely recommend that you guys take the aim-guided missile or the tow missile. That one does 207 to 550 damage, so you're still going to be able to hit tanks in the rear. It's not going to quite be a 2-shot there. You are going to have to chip in a little bit of extra damage, but, you know, almost, right? And it also comes with the benefit that you can attack air targets with this as well. So I think a big takeaway with the IFV play here is that they have just seen an absolute ton of nerfs in this build. Not just, of course, to their HP, because now pretty much everything does more damage in the game, but the IFVs still have the same 1000 HP, but the speed of their cannons has been reduced as well. So the HE cannons here only do 180 rounds per minute. They used to be 200, and the armor-piercing rounds only fire at 120 rounds per minute. They also used to be 200, so they've seen a really big change. And even though the armor piercing rounds do like 30 to 60 damage, which is significantly more than the HE shells do, doing like 11 to 30, the HE shells are firing 50% faster, and you also get 2 extra shells in each salvo, because they've also nerfed that by 2 now, so you only get 10 shots with the armor piercing rounds, but you get 12 with the HE shells. So I think damage output in general here, yes, it is going to be a little bit quicker, a little bit higher with the armor piercing shells, but you're not going to get the benefits of any of that splash damage. So I would not be surprised at all if it's going to be better now to run the HE shells when you're in the IFV. So there you go, guys. That about does it. Those are my biggest takeaways. Is first of all, IFVs have just seen some massive nerfs, so if you're an IFV user, you really got to be careful now. And the second one is that jet gameplay has just massively improved. It really feels like you have an easier time taking out tanks here. I definitely felt it when I was playing on Tuesday when Goldenwood Railway released, and now these numbers certainly explain it. So, leave a comment down below, let me know if you thought this was useful, let me know your thoughts on the current balance of the game. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with everything Battlefield 6. Thank you guys for watching, I'll see you next time.